Welcome, innovative teachers. In today's episode, we are diving deep into within the engineering design process and how we can make it easy. If you're feeling overwhelmed and like the engineering design process is too much, you have come to the right place. We are talking about all those easy steps to start using the engineering design process in your room. Also, if you're already loving our podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. This helps spread the word to other innovative teachers who would love to connect to our community. Stay tuned for a great episode full of lots of useful information. We can't wait to learn and grow with you.
Well, welcome, innovative teachers, to this episode. We were talking about what we wanted to do and how we can best serve you. And we just thought we could keep going with that engineering design process theme. So in the past couple episodes, with the wonderful ladies that we interviewed, go back and check those out. We talked about different elements about the engineering design process, but we realized maybe some of you might not know how to get started and going with that level. So we have our tips for you guys and what has worked well with our kids and different projects to help you get started in whatever space you're in. So for those of you who are like, I have no idea what the engineering design process is. Well, we came up with a basic definition. So basically, the engineering design process is the process that engineers, so different types of engineers use to define a problem, plan multiple solutions, and test their ideas. So you're basically taking kids through those different types of experiences, and it's not always building. It's not like building engineers, like they're computer engineers. So you can use this process in lots of different ways. Actually, my dad is a computer engineer.
I did not know that. He is?
Yeah, he is. My family makes fun of me. They say that I'm the worst at technology. So my dad's like, how did you get this job? Well, Dad, it's little kids. Like, think about it. You have to break it down very, very explicit. I'm not doing what you're doing in the computer engineer world. So, which actually goes perfect with what we're going to talk about, because you have to break it down and keep it simple, just like anything new in your classroom.
Exactly.
So I think there's always that misconception also, like that the engineering design process is replacing the scientific process. I don't know if you hear about stuff like that. If, oh, do I not do this scientific process or anymore? No, like there's a purpose for both. Because sometimes you do have to dive into the science experiments and the hypothesis. There's a purpose for both. So don't think you're replacing. It's just another, in addition to, as a way to solve a problem.
Yeah. And I mean, even in the PD program that we're releasing, one of the things we're talking about is the engineering design process and the scientific method and how many layers overlap and what they have in common and what they maybe don't have in common as far as what you want to accomplish in a room. Because I feel like you said time and place for both, but yeah, they both touch on this. Yeah, they both do this. The wording with them is a little bit different, but you can use them both for different things, which I think, in education is always the cool part. How can you use this versus this? How are they like versus how they're different?
Yeah, totally. And even thinking about like what your state is using as far as science standards go, the engineering design process is in the next generation science standards. So my state, they're integrated within Colorado. So the engineering design process pops up. So even if you're not a STEM teacher, a lot of you might be expected to teach using this process. So we're hoping that we can help you out and give you some ideas to get started. So when I first started doing this now, I teach STEM 3 days a week. So I see kids typically for 3 days, they're done. I don't see them for another month. So I was overwhelmed. I wanted to get through all the steps. I wanted to make sure we did everything, which you should eventually. But a great place to start is really focus in on a couple of those steps and get really good at it. So kids love building. That part actually is never an issue.
No.
So don't worry about that part. Sometimes they might not even finish because they love it so much. But for the define the problem and that part of the stage, because I have 3 days, I typically give them the problem because we don't always have time to explore all the solutions. So I'll give them a problem like, how can you? I used to write it as, can you? But I feel like if you wrote as, can you build a bridge? it's like a yes or no question. Like, I think it
Initially,
doesn't
yeah.
leave it open-ended. So we would always phrase the questions now, how can you? Because just even adding that in simple how just opens it up more. So how can you, whatever it is. So I usually give them the problem and then we'll build some background. Just I have a lot of students who come from different places. And so
Mhm.
for our Iditarod challenge, nobody knew what the Iditarod was. Nobody, not one kid. So we build some background together. So if you're lucky enough to have YouTube unblocked at your school, there's some great resources out there to show kids that background. Definitely look up videos and stuff beforehand so you're not searching YouTube and oh, this seems good. So building background that way, I'll typically watch 1 or 2 videos as a class and then I'll have them write and or draw what they've learned from that video to help them give ideas for what we're going to do. So we'll do that. And then I really try to focus in on the planning. And I think I talked about this in another episode about how I have like a planning rubric. I think we talked about that where it's like a
Yeah.
1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star
Mhm.
plan.
I
Don't know
love
what
that.
that episode is. So if you know, let us
Um,
know.
I'm trying to think if I know. Shoot, planning that. I remember you talking about it.
Yeah.
It was over a month and a half ago because I remember that's when I started doing it in my room because all the kids were like, "What?
Oh, yay.
What is this? We got to do this now?" And I'm like, "Yeah." The older kids at least because they were
Yes.
like wanting to hurry through it.
Yep. But I've seen like such growth in that. And so when you're going through
Mhm.
that planning process, I really want to get that tool, that splat tool to help kids really think about their plan and all the dimensions of it because
Yep.
they really want to rush through it. And I think about just like when you're building something from IKEA, and it has all the sides shown in the paper, like how to build something. So I'm like looking at some of their plans, I have no idea what it is. Like you don't have to be an expert
Mhm.
drawer. So really focusing on the planning. I think this is beneficial also because when you're teaching writing, you have kids plan. Like you
Mhm.
need to have some idea. So the planning part, I really try to work on with the kids, just different strategies for drawing. With the little kids too, they don't know that planning is a thing. For they're learning how to write.
Mhm.
So especially those little kids, giving the support, they're usually more fine with drawing. But oftentimes I'll have them plan in Seesaw. And then before I send them the little template, I actually put the labels already in a text box and then an emoji of what it is. So we just did a little literacy extension for the book Sheep in a Jeep. So how can you build a Jeep to fit as many sheep as possible? And so worked it out in little cotton balls. We're like, all the sheep are in the farm. Go get your sheep out of the farm. And they get all excited. But with their planning, I had tires and then a little emoji of a black circle. So they knew what the word was, windows, a door, and then sheep. So they had to make sure that their plan included all the elements and they had to drag the labels to help with their design. So it helped add more details to their plan, just like if you want them in writing to plan their thinking. So giving those visual supports to kids can really help them dive in deeper through that planning process. And when they're starting to build, having that plan available that they're including all those parts. So that's something that's really helped, even with the older kids too. If you make a list of what they need to use and include, that can help them be more thoughtful in their planning design. But I know I've talked about this also before, but really integrating literacy in STEM can help you through that engineering design process. So try to pick books that have a problem that need to be solved, and you can really go through all of those steps. I have the After the Fall book one, which is great for any time of year. Minimal materials, you can go through the whole engineering design process. If you really want to focus in on planning, my engineer inspiration boards come with a planning sheet. Those are made for little kids, so they have like different things they can build, but you can really take them through that planning process to help them focus in on that and then share their work at the end. The older kids can do really well with the cardboard airplane. That one I have as a
I
virtual.
love that one
Yeah.
from you. I remember seeing that. That was like March or April, I think you
Yes.
put that during
You have a good
quarantine. Yeah, that was
memory.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was.
yeah. I remember it because I remember the video was. I showed the video to my kids
Oh
for
yeah.
remote learning that you had on YouTube, and they loved it. They thought that was awesome.
Like, who's this person? At their house building cardboard airplanes. But I have a video. So that one is virtual. I mean, all my stuff has a digital component anyway, but I know a lot of you are at this time virtual or hybrid right now. So you could still go through this process with your kids remotely, and just breaks down the steps simply. You could skip a few and all of that. So it's not as scary as you think. I like having the steps and you can go back and forth through them. It's a very flowing process, but just keep it very simple. Get really good at one or two of the steps. And as you keep going with this over the years, you can get better at teaching and going more into depth of those different engineering design process steps.
Yes, I absolutely loved everything you said, which leads perfectly into our next segment, which is going to be one of my favorite segments, I think, for as long as we do the show. So hopefully forever, is the Innovative Teacher Corner. All right, welcome back, innovative teachers from the Innovative Teacher Corner. I hope you go check out those awesome people that are part of Innovative Teacher Corner. I know Naomi, especially, I feel like you've spent a lot of time on meetings with these awesome people, and they're all incredible.
They're
So
so cool. And I was saying when I was talking to them, like, it's just so nice to talk to other teachers from
mhm.
around the country, even sometimes the world, and hearing their experiences and the similarities and differences, because we've mentioned this before. Some like STEM is fairly new. So just hearing like what other people are doing and how they're supporting kids is really exciting.
Yes, and I think that's what I love about the Innovative Teacher Corner is meeting the people most of all. So if you want to be part of that, you can check it out later. We'll talk about that kind of as we close, but we're going to continue to plug along about the engineering design process. So Naomi touched on those great things about design and defining the problem, and all those different things. I'm going to kind of talk more about like the building and testing of it, and kind of what I think is important and what we take away from that. So one thing I always tell people when they start is, KISS. A nice acronym is keep it simple,
Oh,
silly, stupid, whatever you want to say. I heard it on The Office, honestly, first. It was the first time I heard it. Michael says it to Dwight, and he says, it hurts my feelings every time, but it's the smartest advice ever. And it really is, because you got to keep it simple. So when you're doing projects, make your projects simple, cheap, and really, when we are building and testing, we're looking at kind of what you would traditionally think is like a hypothesis. Because the reason kids built something the way they did was because they built a hypothesis in their mind. Now we're saying, wow, how did your hypothesis turn out? And they're able to say, well, I learned this, and we learned, this went well and this didn't go well. I know sometimes there's tears in my classroom about that, but
yeah.
I'm always like, you're supposed to fail. Like, that's part of the process. And that's a hard part for kids to understand. I mean, they
Yes.
want to they want to get it right, and so much of their life has been spent saying, well, you have to do well. If you don't do well, you're going to fail. Well, in STEM, you can do very badly and you can still pass. And I know that because I give kids grades all the time,
Mhm.
A's or B's, and their design looks, bad, but they learn so much from point A to point B. And that's what I think it's about. And when we're taking it slow and keeping it simple, those materials aren't always the nicest. So they're not always going to look the best. And that's okay. So, like, a lot of times, like, one I like to do is paper bridges. I love doing that one because you can get note cards really cheap. You can get paper really cheap. Like, I used to just go down and snag some out of the copier room, like some cardstock, some regular paper. They're like, yeah, take some. And the kids would just build bridges out of paper, and then we'd test them with pennies. And it was really cool to see, or it is still cool to see the kids build it. And then they say, oh, wow, this went really well. This went really poorly. And then they see someone else's and they're like, oh, I should try to do something like that. Or I could try to do something just a little bit different than what they're doing. And so they kind of are able to build each other up based off of what they observed and what they can improve. Same thing with like the Rube Goldberg machine. Those are really frustrating for kids, to understand like energy and it moving from step to step from one end to another, and being able to do that. And then really too, when I do cardboard inventors, that's cheap because I can do cardboard. I can also do roller coasters out of straws, and it's really cheap. But all those have that focus point where the kids are testing, and the testing, with the roller coasters is with a ping pong ball to see if it works. It never goes well the first time. It's not supposed to. And really, when you're teaching it and you're doing this engineering design process, you're probably going to, like, after you're listening to this, go try it. And then you're gonna be like, Naomi and Spencer lied to me. That wasn't near as easy as they made it seem. That's because we've been doing it for a long time. I remember sitting in my room after like my first week of teaching STEM being like, I felt like that went terribly, like with some of my lessons.
Me too. I felt like I was a really bad teacher. I felt like
Yes.
a first year teacher all over again. First of all, knowing 100+ kids' names on top of doing these projects. It's like you're throwing a birthday party 6 times.
Oh yeah.
I totally get it.
You got to be excited for each one. You're like,
Like you've never
and
seen
that's
it before.
yeah. And I mean, that's the tough part is like when you go to do it, you're really excited about it. The kids are excited about it, but you're going to feel like you're not necessarily doing the best job you can, but you are. And each time, like I still do lessons that I have uploaded on TPT or that I, maybe I do that are new or I get from someone else and I try it like another STEM teacher and it doesn't go exactly how I want to. It's not supposed to. That's why the engineering design process, I think, is so vital because we do this in life. We start house projects and it doesn't go the way we want to. So we got to do something different or, we go to do something at our job and it doesn't go the way we want to. So we got to change things. Like engineering design process is something kids are going to use for life, like the
Yes.
principles. They're going to build things, they're going to do things and they're not going to go well and they're going to test it and they're going to say, well, what can I learn from this? And teaching them to kind of like fail forward like that not only teaches them the standards, but it teaches them how to approach application. So like, well, when I do learn, how can I apply my knowledge, I think, which is huge, I think.
Well, it
Just
goes back to that culture episode too. Like
mm-hmm.
some people might be overwhelmed by this type of thing because there are steps, but it is like a classroom culture thing. Like it is going to look different. And if that's not your teaching style, that it has to be one way and that's the only way, it could be hard getting started and keeping an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that totally. If you're more about, we have to get the right answer always. If that's your classroom culture, this will be hard. But shifting that to where the kids are failing forward, like you said, and trying multiple solutions and maybe not even getting to the solution, you have to be okay with that.
Yeah. And I think, this episode, we're really talking about like, making this easy and stuff. And I think really what the easiest part about it, this is once you get the hang of it, it's fun. It's easy. You realize how much of what you've been teaching can be put into engineering design process. Like you talked about, like, the different books, like you can define the problem in the book and do it that way. And I think there's so much curriculum that can be put into use in the
Yes.
engineering design process, but it's like, just taking that initial leap, which I get. Like there's plenty of times where I've been asked, to do something. And I'm like, I don't really know if I believe in that too much. But it's one of those things when you start doing it, you're like, wow, like this really works. Kids really understood it. They like it. They're intrigued by it, and they want to be here. They want to learn. And I think that's what makes it so much different than what everyone else is doing.
I think it makes you less of a control freak.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like
Cause
I
it's so hard with that.
it
Cause
is.
teachers want to be like, this is the right answer. And I know like a couple times in my class, I'll be like, you might want to try it differently. Like basically saying like, that's not going to work. And they'll be like, no, I want to do it this way. And I'm like,
Okay. And you can see it
okay.
and you're like, "Okay, cool." Like, or when they're trying to cut a popsicle stick, that's when I do say no. That's not happening.
Yeah.
But no, it's helped me be more laid back about things. I've actually been more of a type A person, like just thinking
Mhm.
about just I don't know, my whole teaching experience, but it's helped me just be more of a type B person in a lot of ways. I know we like to control things as a teacher, so it's a
Yeah.
great way to still have control, but open
Mhm.
control. And it's really cool to see how the kids think through all these experiences.
I agree. And I think that's what you said, just kind of hit the nail on the head on, what we get out of engineering design process. It's almost like people ask me why I like teaching STEM. And I always say, because I don't feel like a teacher. I feel like I'm just like a facilitator
Yep.
almost would be the right word. So I just feel
Yeah.
like I go around and I just kind of talk to them and, and they see it that way. And when they build things like that, they get really excited and, I might make recommendations and that's the biggest thing. They don't have to take my recommendations, but I'll be like, well, why do you want to do it your way? I'm like, give me a good reason. And if they can give me a good reason, I'm like, all right, fair enough.
Yeah.
And, there's been times where I've been wrong and I'm like, you know what, you were right. That was awesome. And there's other times where they're like, man, I should have tried it the way you did. I'm like, well, maybe we could combine our ideas too. So I think it gives them that opportunity as well. But really, we're seeing the learning and the application state happen so much
Yeah.
behind that building and testing and then the redesign of the engineering design process. And I think that's the most fun part for me. I love teaching that part. I'm glad you talked about the other part because I struggle with that. So I know I was like taking notes in my head and writing all my sticky notes because, that part's the toughest part, I feel like, is to define the problem. getting the kids to make an effective plan. Everyone likes to build. That part's not hard,
Yes.
for the kids. And then, I think the next hardest part in the testing and stuff is saying, well, this went poorly. My item's not perfect, because like I said before, it's such a cultural thing where kids are
Yep.
expected to be perfect. And that should not be a standard. I always tell them, like, if you're going to fail in here, like you are going
Yeah.
to tell them at the beginning of the year, every year, to all of my students. And they don't like to hear it, especially some of them that think they're perfect, but they learn real quick, like, oh, that's not what it's about in here. And really, once you get that change, STEM just becomes second nature, I think, which is so
Yeah,
cool.
it does. And giving those real life examples that I mean, I tell them I fail all the time. I mean, I have
Oh yeah.
plenty,
Mhm.
but even just like real things like, you guys, airplanes didn't just pop up like, hey, I'm an airplane, I'm flying in the
Yeah.
sky. There's so many different models. Like, same with the iPhone. It's not like, cool, I'm an iPhone, like I'm here out of nowhere. Like, there's been trial and error. Things are always improving, they're always getting better. It's like just helping them realize that's just, yeah, like that's how the world works. Things can always get better. I have like
Mhm.
a growth mindset in my room. I hate it when people say practice makes perfect, because I tell them, like, you guys, perfect is not real. It's not
Not.
real.
Mhm.
So I tell them, it's in our room, it says practice makes better. I'm like, everything can get
Cool.
better.
We need that on a t-shirt. We should make like an innovative
That
teacher
could be our,
shirt. Says practice makes better. I like that.
yeah,
I'm gonna
practice makes
I
better. I'll send
think I
you the
did.
growth mindset light bulbs. That's one of them. Cause I'm like, you guys, it doesn't exist. Perfect does not exist. It's not a thing. And then I have another one that says, everything new is hard at first. Cause when I hear someone say, this is hard, I'm like, everything new is hard at first.
Yeah.
I'm
I
like the
remember
little
when we started
Yoda
doing.
in their ear, like, practice is
Yeah.
better.
So that goes
Everything.
back to the innovative teacher pocket when we started doing the intros and the conclusions. Remember, we were like, this is hard. And we're like, yes,
Yeah.
it's new. And now we're like basically pros at it. I mean, not
Well, now we're
basically.
like, Spencer does all the outros. No, I'm just kidding. That's how we solve that problem.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, thank you so much for listening to our episode today. Obviously, I am going to lead us out, but we love chatting with you guys and are opening up different ways that we can collaborate with you outside of the podcast. Like, if you have a teacher business, we are always looking for partners. Please reach out to us. We are looking to give you an opportunity in our Innovative Teacher Corner. We want to highlight what you do and how you do it. If you're interested in collaborating with us, whether it's an interview, marketing opportunity, or having us present at your school, send us an email at innovativeteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We already have one school booked for the spring and getting more and more inquiries and getting those on our calendar, so we don't want you to feel left behind. Also, make sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast platform for our Innovative Teacher Podcast to be updated when the new episodes are released. And to see what we're up to on a daily basis and what's going on, follow us on social media at Innovative Teacher Podcast, and follow us on Patreon to get all the goodies in one spot. We update those monthly and you get some really cool things for a really great deal. Thank you so much for listening today, Innovative Teachers. We will see you in the next episode.